Yeah.
Do I need to go pick up the difference of one from Teletype or will this be sufficient?
That one should be some.
On a warm summer evening, Rachel Morin set out for a peaceful jog on a trail she knew well. Hours later, she would be found lifeless, her murder sparking an investigation that would reveal chilling truths and shake an entire community. Join us as we dive into the emotional story of a life cut short and the relentless pursuit of justice for Rachel Morin.
On the warm evening of August 5, 2023, Rachel Morin, a 37-year-old mother of 5, decided to take a jog along the Ma and Pa Trail in Bel Air, Maryland. It was a familiar path, one she had traversed many times, seeking solace and clarity amidst the challenges of daily life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Rachel set off, her mind perhaps occupied with thoughts of her children and the future. Hours passed, and the night grew darker. Rachel's family began to worry. It wasn't like her to be out so late without a word. By 11:20 p.m., her boyfriend reported her missing, igniting a frantic search that would grip the community. Friends, family, and neighbors scoured the trail, their flashlights piercing the inky darkness, calling out her name with increasing desperation. The following day, August 6th, brought a heartbreaking discovery. Rachel's lifeless body was found near the trail, concealed in a drainage culvert. The serene path she once loved had become the site of an unspeakable tragedy. The community was left in shock, grappling with the sudden loss of a vibrant woman whose life was intertwined with so many others. Vigils were held, candles flickering in the night as tears flowed freely. The air was thick with grief and unanswered questions. Who could commit such a heinous act? Why Rachel? The once peaceful town of Bel Air was now overshadowed by fear and uncertainty. The Harford County Sheriff's Office launched an intensive investigation. Detectives combed the area for evidence, collecting DNA samples and interviewing anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual that night. The trail, once a symbol of tranquility, was now a crime scene, cordoned off and scrutinized for any clue that could lead to the perpetrator. Days turned into weeks, and the case seemed to stall. The community's hope for swift justice began to wane, replaced by a lingering unease. Rumors swirled, and trust was eroded as neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. The shadow of Rachel's murder loomed large over Bel Air, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. Rachel's family, devastated by the loss, pleaded for information. Her mother, voice trembling, addressed the media, begging for anyone with knowledge to come forward. The pain in her eyes was a stark reflection of the community's collective sorrow. Yet, despite the outpouring of support, answers remained elusive. The investigation took a significant turn when DNA evidence from the crime scene was linked to a home invasion in Los Angeles. The suspect in that case had assaulted a young girl, and the DNA collected matched the sample from Rachel's murder. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community, reigniting hope that justice might be within reach. Authorities released a composite sketch of the suspect, urging the public to assist in identifying him. The image was plastered across news outlets and social media, a haunting reminder of the evil that had infiltrated their town. Tips poured in, each one meticulously followed up by the dedicated team of investigators. As the months passed, the case remained unsolved, but the determination to find Rachel's killer never wavered. The community stood united, their resolve strengthened by the memory of a woman who had touched so many lives. Rachel's legacy became a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of unimaginable tragedy. In June 2024, nearly 10 months after Rachel Morin's tragic death, a breakthrough emerged. On June 14th, authorities arrested 23-year-old Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The arrest was the culmination of relentless investigative work, combining DNA evidence and interagency collaboration. Martinez Hernandez, an illegal immigrant from El Salvador, had a history that painted a chilling picture. Prior to Rachel's murder, he was linked to a brutal home invasion in Los Angeles in March 2023, where a mother and her 9-year-old daughter were assaulted. The DNA collected from that crime scene matched the evidence found on Rachel's body, creating a direct connection between the two cases. The Harford County Sheriff's Office, in collaboration with the FBI, utilized genetic genealogy to trace Martinez Hernandez's relatives, leading them to his location. Further DNA testing confirmed his identity, solidifying the case against him. The arrest brought a wave of relief to the community, though it was tempered by the knowledge of the horrors he had inflicted. Upon his arrest, Martinez Hernandez was charged with first-degree murder and first-degree rape in connection with Rachel's death. The charges reflected the brutality of the crime and the suffering endured by Rachel in her final moments. The legal proceedings began, with the community closely following each development, yearning for justice to be served. Rachel's family, while relieved by the arrest, faced the daunting prospect of the upcoming trial. They prepared to confront the man accused of taking their beloved Rachel from them. Their strength and resilience became a source of inspiration for many, embodying the enduring love they held for Rachel. The trial commenced in October 2024, drawing national attention. Prosecutors presented a compelling case, detailing the evidence that linked Martinez Hernandez to the crime. Witnesses testified, and forensic experts explained the DNA matches that had led to his arrest. The defense attempted to challenge the evidence, but the overwhelming proof left little room for doubt. As the trial progressed, the community rallied around Rachel's family, offering support and solidarity. Vigils were held outside the courthouse, candles flickering in the evening air, symbolizing the light Rachel had brought into their lives.
Picture this Mom Powell Trail in Bel Air, Maryland. Beautiful summer evening, the kind of place you get away from it all.
Oh, yeah.
Birds are singing, leaves, rustling, peaceful vibe, right? But then August 5th, 2023, that peacefulness, gone, completely shattered when they found the body of 37-year-old Rachel Morin.
Such a stark contrast, isn't it? The serenity of the trail and then this brutal crime. And what makes this case even more unsettling is that this wasn't just some random act of violence. This was targeted, vicious.
Yeah.
And it sent shockwaves through the entire community.
It really did.
Yeah.
Rachel was a mother of 5, a beloved member of the community. And even before they found her body, just her disappearance alone was enough to put everyone on edge. But then discovering her body, well, that just amplified the fear and grief that everyone was feeling.
And to make things worse, initially, there were no leads. Investigators were doing everything they could, combing the scene, talking to anyone who might have seen something, collecting DNA evidence. But for a while, it seemed like they were hitting dead end after dead end. And that kind of uncertainty, it's incredibly unsettling for a community that's already on edge.
Absolutely. It's like this cloud hanging over everything, right? That feeling of not knowing. So what was the turning point? When did things finally start to move forward in the investigation?
It all came down to DNA evidence, but not in the way you might think. The DNA from the crime scene, it was linked to a home invasion in Los Angeles.
Wait, Los Angeles. We're talking about two completely different states here. How did they even connect those two cases?
It's pretty amazing, actually. So in that Los Angeles case, a young girl had been brutally assaulted. Thankfully, she survived. And the police were able to get DNA evidence from the scene. When they ran that DNA through the national databases, guess what? It matched the sample from Rachel's murder.
Wow, so they had a DNA match connecting two violent crimes thousands of miles apart. That's huge. Did they have any idea who they were looking for at that point?
Not right away. They released a composite sketch based on descriptions from the Los Angeles attack, hoping someone might recognize the guy, but the real breakthrough, that came with genetic genealogy.
Genetic genealogy. Okay, that sounds familiar. I feel like I've heard about that being used in other cases, but can you remind me how it works?
Of course. So basically what you're doing is comparing the unknown DNA to samples in public genealogy databases, looking for potential relatives of the suspect. It doesn't matter how distant the relation is. It's kind of like building this massive family tree, working your way backward from those distant cousins until you zero in on the person whose DNA matches the crime scene sample.
Like DNA detectives.
Exactly.
So did it work? Did they find their suspect?
They did. Genetic genealogy led them to a man named Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez. They found him in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And further DNA testing confirmed that his DNA was a match for both the Los Angeles assault and Rachel's murder.
That's incredible. It's amazing how this technology can be used to solve cases that would have seemed impossible before. Can you tell us more about this Martinez Hernandez?
Well, what we know is that he was an illegal immigrant from El Salvador. And if you remember that brutal home invasion in Los Angeles, well, that case gives you a pretty clear picture of the kind of violence he was capable of.
Chilling to think he was able to move around the country, possibly committing other crimes before he was finally caught. What were the specific charges brought against him in Rachel's case?
First-degree murder and first-degree rape. Those charges, especially the rape charge, they really brought to light just how horrific Rachel's final moments were.
Heartbreaking. How did the community react when they arrested him?
You could feel the relief in the air, but it was mixed with anger and sadness, too. This overwhelming desire to see justice for Rachel. The community really rallied around her family during that incredibly difficult time.
Says a lot about the kind of impact Rachel had, that even in the face of such a tragedy, there was so much love and support for her family. It speaks volumes about the kind of person she was.
It really does. And that support was crucial for her family as they faced the long road ahead of them. The trial is going to be incredibly difficult.
I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Having to sit through those proceedings, reliving the trauma of her loss while confronting the man accused of taking her from them. It had to be one of the hardest things they've ever had to endure.
Absolutely. But their strength and determination to see justice done, truly remarkable. They were there for every single hearing, every day of the trial, showing unwavering support for Rachel and demanding accountability for her murder.
That takes immense courage. Can you walk us through the prosecution's case against Martinez Hernandez? What kind of evidence did they present?
Well, the heart of their case was the DNA evidence, that direct link between Martinez Hernandez and both the Los Angeles assault and Rachel's murder. We're not talking about some circumstantial connection. This was a direct scientific match, the kind that's incredibly difficult to argue against.
So the DNA was the key piece of the puzzle. Did the defense try to challenge it?
They did, which is pretty standard in cases like this. They tried to raise doubts about how the evidence was handled, the possibility of contamination, even questioning the reliability of DNA testing in general. But in the end, their arguments just weren't strong enough to overcome the weight of the scientific evidence.
It does sound like the prosecution had a very strong case. Was there anything else they presented besides the DNA?
Yes, they also had witness testimony. People who had seen Martinez Hernandez near the Ma and Pa trail around the time Rachel disappeared. They came forward to share what they saw. And while eyewitness testimony can sometimes be unreliable in this case, it helped to support the DNA evidence and paint a clearer picture of what happened that day.
So they had the scientific evidence from the DNA and eyewitness accounts placing him at the scene. It seems pretty solid. Did the defense offer any alternative theories? Try to shift the blame to someone else?
Their strategy seemed to be more about creating reasonable doubt rather than presenting a completely different story. They tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case, like I mentioned, but they didn't really offer any alternative explanations for Rachel's murder.
Makes sense. That's a pretty common defense strategy, especially when the prosecution has such strong evidence. Did they call any witnesses of their own? Present any evidence to support their claims?
They did call some witnesses, mostly to challenge the prosecution's experts on the DNA evidence, but their attempts to discredit the science, not very successful. The prosecution's experts were highly respected in their fields, and they did a good job of explaining how reliable and accurate the DNA testing methods were.
Sounds like the defense was fighting an uphill battle from the start. With such a strong case against Martinez Hernandez, what was the atmosphere like in the courtroom? Was there a sense that justice would prevail?
There was definitely a feeling of anticipation and hope, especially from Rachel's family and the people from the community who were there. They had been waiting for this moment for so long. The chance to see the man accused of taking Rachel from them held accountable for his actions.
I bet it was incredibly emotional.
It was. There were moments of intense grief, anger, sadness, but also moments of solidarity and resilience. It was really inspiring to see how the community rallied around Rachel's family. You could feel that everyone was united in their pursuit of justice.
It's amazing how a tragedy like this can bring people together and strengthen their resolve to stand up for what's right. What about the jury? Did you get a sense of how they were reacting to the evidence and the testimony?
It's always hard to read a jury, but there were definitely times when you could see them react to certain pieces of evidence, especially the DNA evidence and the heartbreaking testimony from Rachel's family. You could almost feel the weight of the case on their shoulders as they took in the gravity of the crime and the impact it had on so many lives.
Being a juror in a case like this must be an incredible responsibility. They're not just deciding the fate of the defendant. They're also, in a way, providing closure for the victim's family and the community. Did the jury deliberate for a long time?
They did, several days, which isn't unusual for a complex murder trial. They had to go over all the evidence, weigh the arguments from both sides, and come to a unanimous decision. It's a process that requires a lot of thought, careful discussion, and introspection.
I can imagine how tense those few days must have been for everyone waiting for the verdict, especially for Rachel's family.
Yeah.
That pivotal moment of truth where they finally learn whether or not justice will be served.
Absolutely. It's the culmination of months, sometimes even years of investigation, legal proceedings, emotional turmoil. And in this case, the wait was worth it.
So what was the verdict?
After days of deliberation, the jury came back with a guilty verdict on all counts: first-degree murder and first-degree rape.
I can only imagine the reaction in the courtroom.
Oh, it was a wave of emotion. Gasps, sobs from Rachel's family and supporters as the verdict was read. This overwhelming sense of relief, validation, and most importantly, justice being served.
That must have been such a powerful moment for everyone who had been following this case. It really speaks to the hard work of the investigators, prosecutors, everyone involved, that they were able to secure this conviction. It shows that even in the face of such a horrific crime, the system can work to bring the perpetrator to justice.
It really does. And while nothing can truly bring Rachel back or erase the pain of her loss, this verdict at least provides some measure of closure and accountability. It sends a strong message that these kinds of violent acts will not be tolerated and that those who commit them will be held responsible for their actions.
Such a powerful message,
Yeah.
and one that the community needed to hear as they begin to heal and rebuild after this tragedy.
Right.
What was the sentence? How much time will Martinez Hernandez spend behind bars?
He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He'll spend the rest of his life incarcerated, ensuring that he can never harm another person again.
A just sentence for the crimes he committed. It brings a sense of finality to this long and painful chapter for Rachel's family and the community. They can now hopefully begin to move forward, knowing that the man who took her from them will never be free to hurt anyone else.
That's the hope. While the scars of this tragedy will undoubtedly remain, the conviction and sentencing of Martinez Hernandez offer a sense of justice and closure that will hopefully allow for healing and a renewed sense of peace in the community.
It's remarkable how this case, which started with so much uncertainty and fear, was ultimately solved through a combination of traditional investigative techniques and cutting-edge science like genetic genealogy.
It really speaks to the dedication of law enforcement, the incredible advances in forensic technology, and the power of collaboration across different jurisdictions. This case is proof that even in the most complex and challenging cases, justice can and does prevail.
And that's where we'll leave it for today. But join us next time for part 2 of our deep dive into the Rachel Morin case, where we'll delve deeper into the trial, the evidence presented, and the impact this case had on the community.
It's a story you won't want to miss, so be sure to tune in.
It really makes you think about how far we've come in terms of forensic technology
Oh, yeah.
and how it played such a crucial role in bringing Rachel's killer to justice. I mean, this case really highlights the potential of genetic genealogy as a tool to solve crimes, especially those that might have otherwise remained unsolved.
Absolutely. It's a game changer, no doubt about it. But it also raises some important questions about privacy and consent. I mean, think about it. These databases were originally created for genealogy research, not criminal investigations.
That's a really good point. It's a powerful tool, no question. But like any powerful tool, it needs to be used responsibly and ethically. It seems like we're constantly trying to find that balance between solving crimes and safeguarding individual privacy. It's a conversation we need to be having as a society, especially as this technology becomes more commonplace in law enforcement.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the individuals whose DNA is in these databases. It's about their relatives, too.
Yeah.
They never consented to having their genetic information used this way.
That's true. It's a complicated issue. But in Rachel's case, it feels like the benefits outweighed those concerns. We're talking about a violent criminal who might have gone on to harm other people if he hadn't been caught.
I agree. And it's important to remember that in most cases, law enforcement agencies have to obtain warrants before they can even access these databases. It's not just a free-for-all. There are legal safeguards in place to try and prevent misuse.
That's good to know. So it really comes down to finding that balance, like you said.
Yeah.
Taking a step back from the specifics of this case. What does Rachel's story tell us about the broader issue of violence against women?
It's a tragic reminder that women are disproportionately victims of violence, often in public spaces where they should feel safe. Rachel was just out for a jog, something she enjoyed when her life was brutally cut short.
It's a harsh reality, and it's hard to accept. It really emphasizes the need for continued awareness, education, and systemic changes to address the root causes of this violence and create a world where women can truly feel safe.
I couldn't agree more. Rachel's case, as horrific as it was, has sparked important conversations about community safety, personal responsibility, and the role we all play in looking out for each other.
It's about creating a culture of respect, empathy, and accountability, challenging those harmful norms and behaviors that perpetuate this violence. It's a collective effort, and it starts with each and every one of us.
Well said. We all have a responsibility to speak out against violence, support survivors, and work towards a future where tragedies like Rachel's are no longer the norm.
A future worth fighting for, that's for sure. Rachel's story, as tragic as it is, ultimately reminds us of the importance of resilience, the power of hope, and the unwavering pursuit of justice.
And as we reflect on this case, I think it's worth asking ourselves, what steps can we take both individually and collectively to create a safer and more just world for everyone? What kind of legacy do we want to leave behind?
Those are powerful questions to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Rachel Morin case. It's been a heavy but important conversation. And to our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring these issues, engage in thoughtful dialogue, and work towards a future where justice and passion prevail.
Yeah, it really does make you think, doesn't it, about how much forensic technology has advanced.
For sure.
And the role it played in this case. Bringing Rachel's killer to justice. I mean, without it, who knows? This case might still be unsolved.
It's incredible, right? Like you said before, genetic genealogy, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
But it also brings up those ethical concerns.
Right.
Privacy consent. I mean, these databases weren't intended for this.
Exactly. They were for family history research, not catching criminals.
It's almost like we're in uncharted territory here, trying to figure out how to use this technology responsibly.
We are. It's this balancing act between solving crimes and protecting people's privacy.
And it's a conversation we need to have as a society.
Yeah.
Because this technology isn't going away anytime soon.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the people whose DNA is in the databases. It's about their families, too. Their genetic information is being used without their knowledge or consent.
It's a tough situation. But in this case, with Rachel's murder, it feels like finding her killer outweighed those concerns.
I think so, too. We're talking about a violent criminal who could have harmed others.
And it's not like law enforcement has free rein with these databases either.
No, not at all. They have to go through the proper legal channels, obtain warrants. It's not a free-for-all. There are safeguards in place.
That's reassuring to know. But even with those safeguards in place, it's still a conversation we need to keep having. As a society, we need to decide what level of access is appropriate.
Absolutely. So important. Shifting gears a bit, Rachel's story, it really highlights a much bigger problem, right? Violence against women.
It does. It's a tragic reminder that women are far too often targets of violence, and often in places where they should feel safe, like Rachel.
Yeah.
She was just out for a jog, something she enjoyed, and her life was taken from her.
It's a horrifying reality, and it underscores the need for greater awareness, education, and systemic changes. We have to address the root causes of this violence, create a world where women can feel safe no matter where they are.
Couldn't agree more. It's about fostering a culture of respect, empathy, and accountability, challenging those norms and behaviors that allow this kind of violence to continue. It's a collective effort, something we all have a part in.
Exactly. We can't stay silent. We need to speak out against violence, support survivors, and work towards a future where tragedies like Rachel's don't happen anymore.
That's the goal, a future worth fighting for. As tragic as Rachel's story is, it ultimately reminds us about the power of hope, the importance of resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of justice, even in the darkest of times.
It does. And as we wrap up our deep dive into this case, I think that's crucial for each of us to reflect. What can we do, both as individuals and as a community, to create a safer and more just world for everyone?
What kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves. And thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Rachel Morin case.
Yeah.
It's been a difficult but incredibly important conversation.
It has.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring these issues, keep the conversation going, and continue working towards a future where justice and compassion prevail.